Imagine standing on the edge of financial ruin with just $500 left in your bank account and a pile of unpaid bills staring you in the face. Now picture risking every last dollar on a dream that everyone, including your closest friends, calls a fool's gamble. This is the story of Lena, a single mother who turned her last $500 into a multi-million-dollar empire. But not without moments of heartbreak, countless sleepless nights, and a leap of faith so daring it nearly cost her everything. What happened next? Well, her story will leave you speechless. Lena's story began in a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. The walls were thin, and the floors creaked with every step, echoing the weight of her struggles. She lived with her 6-year-old son, Danny, who was too young to understand why they sometimes ate plain toast for dinner or why his mother looked so tired every evening. Lena, a single mother, worked 2 jobs, one as a cashier at a local grocery store and the other cleaning offices at night. Despite her relentless efforts, every month seemed to end the same way, with a stack of unpaid bills piled up on the kitchen counter. Lena's morning started before sunrise. She would wake up, dress Danny in his school uniform, and force a smile as she handed him a brown paper bag with a meager lunch inside, a few slices of bread, a small apple, and a single juice box. It was all she could afford. As she watched him walk out the door with his tiny backpack, she felt a familiar pang of guilt tightening in her chest. She wished she could give him more, but there was simply no room to spare in her budget. By 8 a.m., Lena was at her first job, scanning items at the grocery store, pretending to be cheerful as customers passed by. It wasn't that she hated her work, but the monotony of it drained her soul. Every beep of the scanner was a reminder of the life she was stuck in, a life she never imagined for herself. Lena had dreams once. She had always been creative, always loved working with her hands. But those dreams seemed so far away now, almost like someone else's memories. Now, all that mattered was surviving each day without slipping further into debt. Her second job was even harder. After her shift at the grocery store, she would rush to Danny's school to pick him up, bring him home, and help him with his homework before handing him off to her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Turner, who kindly watched him at night. Lena would then take the bus to her night shift cleaning offices. The hours were long and the work was grueling. By the time she returned home, exhausted and sore, it was often well past midnight. She would tiptoe into Danny's room, kiss his forehead, and whisper an apology she knew he would never hear. "I'm sorry, baby," she would say softly, wiping away the tears that fell silently. "I'm doing my best." But even her best wasn't enough. One evening, after a particularly rough day at work, Lena found herself staring at a red notice from her landlord, an eviction warning. She had 2 weeks to come up with $1,200 or she and Danny would be out on the streets. Panic surged through her. She had no family to turn to, no friends who could help, and the mere thought of losing the tiny apartment that they called home was unbearable. How had things gotten so bad? What kind of future could she offer her son if she couldn't even provide him a stable roof over his head? Desperate for answers, Lena sat at the kitchen table long after Danny had gone to bed, staring blankly at the few remaining dollars in her bank account. $523.24 to be exact. That was it. Everything she had in the world. The gravity of it made her feel dizzy. She knew she could barely scrape together the rent money in time. Even if she picked up extra shifts, it wouldn't be enough. And that's when the thought hit her. A thought so reckless, so absurd, it almost made her laugh through her tears. What if she didn't try to save the money? What if instead of clinging to every last penny, she did the unthinkable? What if she invested it? The idea was ludicrous. How could she possibly risk what little she had left when she was on the brink of losing everything? But then again, what did she have to lose? Even if she managed to pay this month's rent, what about next month? And the one after that? Was she just going to keep scraping by forever, struggling to make ends meet? Her eyes drifted to a small, worn-out box on the shelf, the box where she kept her old jewelry-making supplies. It had been years since she'd touched it. Back when she was younger, Lena used to make bracelets and earrings, gifting them to friends or selling a few at local fairs. She had loved it, creating something beautiful from scratch, using her hands to shape raw materials into something people cherished. But when Danny was born, she had pushed that part of herself aside, believing that motherhood left no room for dreams. But now, sitting alone in the dimly lit kitchen, Lena felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. What if she took the last $500 and bought supplies? Beads, wires, packaging, everything she'd need to make jewelry again? It wouldn't be enough to save them from eviction immediately, but it was a chance. A small, crazy chance to turn things around. Her hands shook as she imagined what people would say. "You're being irresponsible, Lena," they'd tell her. "You need to think practically, not chase fantasies." And maybe they were right. But something deep inside her, a stubborn, desperate belief, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was her one shot. With a trembling hand, Lena picked up her phone and opened an online marketplace for jewelry supplies. As she scrolled through listings, filling her cart with beads, clasps, and tools, she felt her heart pounding louder than ever. This was it. There would be no going back once she hit checkout. One wrong move, and she and Danny could end up in a shelter. But if she didn't try, she would never forgive herself. Taking a deep breath, Lena closed her eyes and clicked place order. She sat there staring at the confirmation email that arrived moments later, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and terror. What had she just done? She had put their entire future on the line for a dream that might never pay off. It was the most reckless, most terrifying thing she had ever done. But for the first time in a long while, Lena felt something else too, alive. The next few days were a blur of nerves and second-guessing. Had she made the biggest mistake of her life? Her son still needed dinner every night, the bills still needed to be paid, and she was still scrambling to come up with the rent money. But as the small packages of supplies began arriving, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every evening, after coming home from her cleaning job, she would sit at the kitchen table, carefully stringing beads, twisting wires, and crafting delicate bracelets. Her hands moved quickly, and with each piece she completed, she felt a spark of something that had been missing for years: creativity, passion, and most importantly, hope. Still, reality was hard to ignore. The eviction deadline loomed closer, and Lena knew she had only a short window to make this gamble work. She started posting her creations online, taking shaky photos with her old phone and sharing them on social media. She created a small online shop and reached out to everyone she knew, begging them to spread the word. But days passed and the sales didn't come. Not a single order. Fear clawed at her. Had she been foolish to think she could turn this tiny dream into something real? Maybe everyone had been right. Maybe this really was a waste. But then, one evening, just as Lena was about to give up, her phone buzzed. A notification that would change everything. The notification on Lena's phone read, "You've made a sale." For a moment, she thought it was a mistake. She blinked, staring at the screen in disbelief. Someone had actually purchased one of her handmade bracelets, a simple piece she had priced at $15. Lena's heart raced as she read the details of the order over and over again. The customer was a woman named Sarah, a complete stranger. She didn't know Lena's story, didn't know the gamble Lena had taken with her last $500, yet she had chosen to believe in her work. It was a tiny order, just one bracelet, but to Lena, it felt like a lifeline. This wasn't just a sale, it was hope. But before she could even process the excitement, reality struck. One sale wouldn't even cover groceries for the week, let alone save her from eviction. If this was going to work, she needed a miracle, a way to turn that single order into hundreds more, and fast. Driven by a newfound surge of determination, Lena threw herself into her work. Every night she sat at the kitchen table after her cleaning shift, carefully crafting piece after piece. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Her hands were blistered, her eyes bloodshot, but her spirit, it was unbreakable. She began studying every online tutorial she could find, learning about search engine optimization, social media marketing, and how to photograph her products to make them look more appealing. She invested time she didn't have, energy she couldn't spare, and all the creativity she could muster to make each piece unique. She crafted delicate necklaces and bold statement earrings, pouring her heart into each design. The kitchen, once cluttered with unpaid bills and reminders of her struggles, was now filled with beads, wires, and tiny creations that represented her last shot at turning things around. But weeks went by, and her progress was painstakingly slow. For every sale she made, there were a dozen days of silence. Still, Lena refused to give up. She started reaching out to small influencers on Instagram, offering them her jewelry for free in exchange for a shout-out or a post. Most ignored her, but a few agreed, and slowly she began to see a trickle of visitors to her online shop. It wasn't enough to pay the rent yet, but it was something, just enough to keep her going. With only a few days left before her eviction deadline, Lena's desperation turned into a frantic scramble. She barely had enough orders to cover a fraction of what she owed. On the night before the rent was due, Lena sat alone in the darkened kitchen, staring at her dwindling supplies. She had put everything into this gamble, her money, her energy, even her sanity. And yet, here she was, no closer to saving her home than when she had started. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about Danny, asleep in the next room. She had risked everything, believing that somehow it would all work out. But it hadn't. Not really. And tomorrow she would have to face the landlord with nothing to show but a handful of orders that couldn't possibly cover the rent. For a moment, Lena considered giving up, considered packing it all away and accepting defeat. Maybe she really had been foolish to think she could change her fate. But then, just as she was about to close her laptop, her phone buzzed again. Another notification, then another, and another. She grabbed the phone, heart pounding, as she saw the words flash across the screen. Order received. New sale. Your item has been purchased. Her shop had exploded. Overnight, her post had gone viral. One of the influencers she had sent her jewelry to, a young woman with a huge following, had posted a story featuring Lena's work. And people were responding. They were buying. They were sharing. They were flooding her shop with orders. Lena sat there shaking, watching in disbelief as the sales kept pouring in. It was as if the universe had been waiting until the very last moment to give her a fighting chance. By morning, she had received over 200 orders, each one more than she had dared to dream of. The notifications kept coming faster than she could read them. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. But there was no time to celebrate. With only hours left before the landlord was due, Lena did the unthinkable. She stayed up all night, packaging every single piece of jewelry she had ready, writing heartfelt thank you notes to each customer, and working with a speed she didn't know she was capable of. When the landlord knocked on her door the next morning, Lena felt her heart skip a beat. She opened the door slowly, bracing herself for the inevitable argument, for the shame of begging for more time. But instead, she held her head high and handed him a check. This is for the rent, she said firmly, her voice steady even though her hands were trembling. The landlord looked at her, eyebrows raised in surprise. Lena could see the disbelief in his eyes as he took the check and glanced at it. It was more than he had expected, enough to cover the rent for the month and a little extra. How did you, he started to ask, but Lena just smiled. I made a bet, she said softly, and for once it paid off. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, tears of relief streaming down her face. She had done it. Somehow, against all odds, she had made it through. But this was only the beginning. With her rent paid, Lena now had a chance to focus on growing her business. She knew she couldn't let this momentum slip away. The flood of orders had drained her inventory, and she barely had enough supplies left to fulfill the demand. But instead of panicking, Lena saw an opportunity. She took the small profits she had made and immediately reinvested every dollar into more materials, higher quality packaging, and even a professional website. It was a huge risk, spending money she should have saved, but Lena knew she couldn't afford to play it safe. Not now. The gamble was paying off, and she needed to keep pushing. With each new order, she refined her process, shipping faster, improving her designs, and building a brand that people began to talk about. She didn't just want to sell jewelry, she wanted to create something that people loved, something that made them feel special. The late nights didn't stop. Lena still worked her day job and her night shift, balancing everything with the grace of a tightrope walker. But now there was a spark in her eyes, a fire that couldn't be extinguished. She was building something, something real. Every time a new order came in, every time a customer left a positive review, Lena felt her confidence grow. Maybe this wasn't just a fluke. Maybe, just maybe, she was on to something bigger. And then, one day it happened. A message popped up in her inbox, an email from a small boutique owner who had stumbled across her shop online. They wanted to stock her jewelry in their store. Lena read the message at least 10 times, her hands shaking as she processed the words. This was her first wholesale order, and it was a huge step forward. But it was also a terrifying one. The order was big, bigger than anything she had handled before. She would need to invest in more supplies, more packaging, more of everything, and she didn't have the capital to make it happen. Once again, Lena found herself at a crossroads. She could play it safe, stick to small online sales, and slowly build up her business. Or she could take another leap of faith and go all in. This time, though, she didn't hesitate. She had learned something important over the past few months, something that had changed the way she saw the world. Fear might be powerful, but hope was even stronger, and she was done letting fear hold her back. The wholesale order changed everything. Lena could hardly believe it was real. After months of working tirelessly with small online orders, this was the first sign that her jewelry business was gaining traction. But with it came a new wave of fear. What if she couldn't deliver? What if she messed this up? There was no room for mistakes now. Fulfilling this order was her one shot to prove that she was more than just a small-time jewelry maker. She was a legitimate businesswoman. The boutique owner wanted 150 pieces within a month, a volume Lena had never handled before. And the payment terms? She wouldn't see a single penny until the order was completed and delivered. That meant using every last bit of her savings again, sinking every dollar into materials and supplies. There was no fallback plan if this didn't work. But Lena didn't hesitate. She was scared, yes, but she was also determined. This time she wasn't just betting on a product, she was betting on herself. For the next few weeks, Lena's apartment turned into a makeshift production line. Her kitchen table was covered in beads and wires. The living room was stacked with boxes and envelopes. Even Danny's small desk became part of her operation. She worked around the clock, barely stopping to eat or sleep. It was exhausting, but there was something thrilling about it too. This was different from her night shifts or grocery store hours. This was her dream, taking shape right in front of her eyes. And despite the long nights and sore fingers, Lena found herself smiling more than she had in years. There were countless moments of doubt along the way. One night, as she packaged the 75th necklace, the clasp broke in her hands. It was a small defect, something she could fix quickly, but it was enough to make her stomach drop. If just one piece had an issue, the entire order could be rejected. Lena stayed up until dawn, inspecting every single item for flaws, tightening clasps, adjusting lengths, anything to ensure her work was flawless. There was no room for error. She couldn't afford to lose this chance. And then, just as she was nearing the finish line, disaster struck. A supplier mishap left her short of a critical component, specialized beads that were the highlight of one of her designs. She had planned everything meticulously, but this was something she hadn't foreseen. Panicking, Lena scrambled to find a replacement. She called every supplier she knew, begged for rush shipments, and even considered redesigning the piece entirely. But that would mean missing the delivery deadline, and she knew that a late order could destroy her reputation before she even had one. The stress was suffocating. The clock was ticking down, and Lena could feel herself unraveling. For a brief moment, she considered canceling the order altogether. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe she wasn't ready for this after all. But then, as if fate were testing her resolve, a miracle happened. One of her suppliers, moved by her story and determination, agreed to ship the beads overnight at no extra cost. Lena nearly cried when the package arrived the next day. It was the break she so desperately needed. With a renewed sense of purpose, Lena pushed through the final days of production, working faster than ever before. She meticulously packed each item, double-checking every detail. Finally, with just a day to spare, she sealed the last box and shipped the entire order. It was done. She had done it. But as soon as the packages left her hands, a new fear gripped her. What if the boutique didn't like them? What if the designs weren't up to their standards? The next few days were agony. Every time her phone buzzed, Lena jumped, heart racing. And then, one afternoon, the email came. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the screen, bracing herself for the worst. But instead of rejection, she saw the words, "We love your work. The pieces are stunning. Let's talk about a long-term partnership." Lena's knees nearly buckled. She read the email again, then once more, just to be sure. They loved it. They wanted more. This wasn't just a one-time order. They were offering her a permanent spot in their boutique. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what this meant. This was no longer a side hustle or a desperate attempt to make rent. This was real. She was building something, something people valued, something people wanted. All those nights spent doubting herself, all those moments of panic and fear, had led her here. But as thrilling as the success was, Lena knew this was only the beginning. With a permanent spot in the boutique came new challenges, higher expectations, stricter deadlines, and the need for a reliable production process. She couldn't keep doing everything alone. If she wanted to grow, she needed help. And that meant making another difficult decision, reinvesting her profits into hiring part-time workers and upgrading her workspace. It was terrifying. For so long, Lena had held on to every dollar, afraid that one wrong move would send her spiraling back into poverty. But now, for the first time, she was starting to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about making jewelry. It was about building a future for herself, for Danny, and for the business that had become her lifeline. So Lena took the plunge once again. She hired two local women who were also struggling to make ends meet, teaching them everything she knew about jewelry making. At first, it was awkward. She wasn't used to giving instructions or managing others, but slowly they found their rhythm. Lena realized that she wasn't just creating jewelry, she was creating opportunities, giving others a chance to dream the way she had once dreamed. With the extra hands, production became smoother. They filled more orders, took on bigger clients, and started experimenting with new designs. Each new success fueled the next, creating a momentum that felt unstoppable. And as Lena watched her small business grow, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Pride in herself, in the risks she had taken, in the team she had built. She was no longer the scared single mother who had gambled her last $500. She was an entrepreneur, a business owner, and, most importantly, she was in control of her destiny. But the journey was far from over. As her business expanded, so did the challenges. New competitors emerged, trying to replicate her designs. There were supply chain issues, moments of self-doubt, and days when it seemed like the entire operation might collapse under its own weight. But each time a problem arose, Lena faced it head-on. She had learned that fear and setbacks were inevitable. What mattered was how she responded. One day, as she looked around her small but bustling workshop, Lena realized just how far she had come. The woman who had once stared at her dwindling bank balance, terrified of losing everything, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, braver, and more resilient. She had faced down failure, embraced uncertainty, and come out the other side stronger. And now there was no stopping her. The boutique order had been the turning point, the moment that transformed Lena's small dream into a thriving reality. It was the first taste of success, the first sign that her gamble was paying off. But more importantly, it was proof that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. And this was just the beginning. Lena knew that there were bigger challenges ahead, bigger risks to take, and bigger dreams to chase. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid, because now she knew exactly what she was capable of. And she wasn't about to stop until she had built the empire she had always dreamed of. With the boutique partnership secured and her small team in place, Lena's business began to pick up momentum at an astonishing speed. What started as a modest operation at her kitchen table was now evolving into something far bigger than she ever imagined. Orders kept pouring in, not just from small boutiques, but from other retailers and online customers who had heard of her through word of mouth and social media. It was surreal. Every day, new opportunities landed in her inbox: collaborations, custom orders, and even inquiries from high-end stores interested in carrying her jewelry. Lena was barely able to keep up, but with growth came growing pains. Suddenly, her once cozy workshop felt cramped and chaotic. There were not enough hands to complete the orders, and quality control was slipping. For every piece that passed inspection, there were two that didn't meet her standards. Lena knew she was at a critical juncture. If she couldn't deliver consistent quality, the business could crumble just as quickly as it had risen. The pressure was immense, and Lena found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had bitten off more than she could chew. But quitting wasn't an option. Lena wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the women she had hired, the single mothers and struggling artists who now depended on her for income. They believed in her, and she couldn't let them down. So she made another bold decision. It was time to expand. Lena took a deep breath and signed a lease on a small, affordable commercial space, a space that, though modest, was far more professional than her cramped apartment. It was a risk, another financial leap that stretched her thin, but Lena trusted her instincts. The new space allowed her to hire more workers and streamline her production. With more hands on deck and a dedicated workshop, Lena was able to increase output without sacrificing quality. And it showed. Her new products were sharper, her designs more polished. It wasn't long before the buzz around her business grew even louder. Customers loved not just the jewelry, but the story behind it. The story of a single mother who risked everything to build something beautiful. Lena became a local sensation, invited to speak at small business conferences and even featured in a local magazine. People wanted to know her secrets, to learn how she had turned nothing into something extraordinary. And then came the email that changed everything. It was from a major retail chain, a national brand known for supporting small businesses and independent artisans. They wanted to meet with her. Lena stared at the email, hands shaking. This was it. This was the opportunity she had been dreaming of, a chance to take her business to the next level. But it was also terrifying. One wrong move, one bad impression, and this could all disappear. The meeting was set for 2 weeks away, 2 weeks to prepare for the most important pitch of her life. Lena threw herself into work like never before. She refined her designs, crafted a sleek new catalog, and spent hours practicing her pitch until she could recite it in her sleep. But self-doubt crept in during every quiet moment. What if they didn't like her designs? What if they thought she was too small, too inexperienced? What if, after all this effort, she failed? The day of the meeting arrived, and Lena could barely breathe as she stepped into the gleaming glass office building of the retail giant. She was greeted by a team of executives, all polished and professional, their eyes scanning her with the kind of scrutiny that made her palms sweat. They asked tough questions, poked holes in her business plan, and seemed skeptical that someone who had started out of a kitchen could handle the demands of a national supply chain. But Lena didn't flinch. She looked them in the eye and answered every question with the calm confidence she had fought so hard to build. She spoke from her heart, about why she started, about the nights she stayed up crafting pieces by hand, about the women she had hired, and the community she was trying to build. Lena wasn't just pitching a product, she was sharing a vision. And as she finished, the room fell silent. One of the executives leaned forward, studying her intently. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "But are you sure you're ready for this kind of scale? A national rollout is a huge responsibility." Lena swallowed hard, her throat dry. This was the moment that could make or break everything. But instead of backing down, she took a deep breath and said, "I've been ready since the day I started this business. I may not have a fancy background or a big team, but I have something just as valuable: determination. I'm not afraid to put in the work. Give me a chance, and I promise you won't regret it." The executive's gaze softened, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, we'll start small. Test your line in a few stores and see how it performs. If it goes well, we'll talk about expanding. Deal?" Lena's heart soared. "Deal," she whispered, barely able to believe it. She had done it. She had landed the biggest deal of her life. But as the excitement faded, reality set in. The trial order was still huge, more than triple what she had ever produced at one time. And the deadline? Just 4 weeks. For a moment, Lena felt the familiar grip of fear. How was she supposed to pull this off? But then she remembered everything she had overcome to get here. Every sleepless night, every setback, every tearful moment of doubt. She hadn't come this far just to fail now. With a steely resolve, she returned to her workshop and called an emergency meeting with her team. "We have a huge order," she told them, her voice steady even though her hands were trembling. "It's going to be tough, and we'll all need to give it everything we've got. But if we pull this off, it'll change everything." The room buzzed with excitement and nerves, but nobody hesitated. They all agreed to work extra hours, to push harder than ever before. Over the next 4 weeks, the workshop was a flurry of activity. Lena was everywhere at once, and designing, packing, inspecting, and even delivering supplies herself when shipments were delayed. There were moments when it felt impossible, when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, when small mistakes nearly derailed the entire operation. But each time, they pulled through. And finally, with just hours to spare, the last box was sealed, the last package sent off. Lena watched as the delivery truck pulled away, carrying her hopes and dreams with it. It was out of her hands now. All she could do was wait. The following weeks were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Then one morning her phone rang. It was the executive from the retail chain. "Congratulations," he said, a smile in his voice. "Your line's sold out in every store. We're ready to move forward." Lena almost dropped the phone. It had worked. It had really worked. She felt lightheaded, like she was floating. She had done it. She had taken her tiny, fragile dream and turned it into something real, something big. But more than that, she had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The retail deal catapulted Lena's business into the spotlight. Orders flooded in from across the country. Her team doubled, then tripled, and she had to hire a full-time manager just to keep up. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. But Lena wouldn't have had it any other way. She had taken the leap, made the gamble, and now she was soaring. As she stood in her bustling workshop, watching her team work with a shared sense of purpose and pride, Lena knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. She had built something powerful, something that would last. And there was no limit to how far she could go. With her line selling out in stores nationwide, Lena found herself standing at a crossroads. Her small business had officially become something much bigger. The national retail chain was thrilled with her performance and wanted to expand her line to more locations. But along with this success came a new wave of challenges. Production demands were soaring, and the stakes were higher than ever before. Lena's journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As word of her success spread, other retailers started knocking on her door, eager to feature her designs. It was thrilling, but also overwhelming. Lena's small team was already working at full capacity, and they were struggling to keep up with the increasing demand. Yet she couldn't turn these opportunities away. The pressure was intense. One slip-up, one late order, and her carefully built reputation could shatter. But Lena wasn't about to let fear hold her back. She had overcome so much to get to this point, and she wasn't going to let anything stop her now. With her eyes set on expansion, Lena made another bold move. She took out a small business loan to invest in a proper manufacturing facility. It was a risky decision, putting herself in debt again. But Lena had learned that sometimes taking calculated risks was the only way to grow. The new facility was a game changer. Equipped with professional machinery and a larger team, Lena's business transformed almost overnight. What once took her and a few workers weeks to produce could now be done in a matter of days. But the real challenge was managing the rapid growth. Lena found herself juggling multiple roles: designer, manager, marketer, and business strategist all at once. It was exhausting, and there were times when the sheer weight of responsibility seemed crushing. She missed the days when it was just her at the kitchen table, crafting each piece by hand. But then she would walk through the facility, seeing the bustling workshop filled with hard-working people, many of them single mothers and women who had struggled just like she had, and she would feel a surge of pride. This wasn't just about her anymore. She was building something that mattered, something that was changing lives. As her business grew, so did her influence. Media outlets started featuring her story, a single mother who had turned $500 into a multi-million-dollar empire. Interviews, TV appearances, and invitations to speak at entrepreneurship events flooded in. Lena, who had once been too shy to speak up in a room full of people, was now standing on a stage, sharing her journey with audiences around the world. She spoke about perseverance, about the courage to take risks, and about the power of believing in yourself even when no one else does. Her words resonated with countless aspiring entrepreneurs, and her story became a beacon of hope for those struggling to turn their dreams into reality. But even as her empire expanded, Lena never forgot where she came from. She made it a point to give back to her community, donating a portion of her profits to local shelters and creating a scholarship fund for single mothers pursuing their own business ventures. She knew what it felt like to be on the edge of losing everything, and she wanted to help others find their footing the way she had. This became a core part of her company's mission, and it wasn't long before people started calling her business a brand with a heart. Still, the road ahead wasn't smooth. As her business scaled, so did the competition. Imitators began popping up, copying her designs and selling them at lower prices. There were moments when Lena felt frustrated and betrayed. She had poured her heart and soul into this business. How could others so easily try to take it away? But instead of letting the setbacks discourage her, Lena used them as fuel. She doubled down on innovation, constantly evolving her designs and adding new, exclusive collections that kept customers coming back. She also focused heavily on building a loyal community, engaging personally with her customers through social media, and sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses of her creative process. Her authenticity paid off. Customers loved not just her jewelry, but the story behind it, the story of a woman who never gave up, no matter how tough things got. Lena's brand became synonymous with resilience, creativity, and empowerment. She wasn't just selling products. She was selling a message, an idea, that no matter where you start, you can build something extraordinary if you have the courage to keep going. The next big break came when a luxury department store reached out, wanting to feature her jewelry in a high-profile campaign. It was a dream come true, but it also meant stepping into a whole new world, one that was far more competitive and cutthroat than anything Lena had faced before. There were endless negotiations, tight deadlines, and design revisions that pushed her to the brink of exhaustion. But Lena embraced the challenge. She knew that this was her moment to prove that her brand wasn't just a fluke. It was here to stay. The campaign was a massive success. Lena's pieces were featured in fashion magazines and displayed in storefronts across major cities. Suddenly, her name was being mentioned alongside established luxury brands. Orders surged, and the value of her company skyrocketed. But with success came a new set of challenges, pressures to scale even faster, to expand internationally, to meet the ever-growing expectations of investors and partners. Lena knew she needed help, so she brought in a team of seasoned professionals, marketing experts, production managers, and strategists who could help her navigate this new terrain. It was a difficult transition, letting go of some control and trusting others to handle parts of the business she had managed alone for so long. But Lena realized that if she wanted to truly build an empire, she couldn't do it all by herself. With her new team in place, Lena's business entered a new phase of growth. She launched new collections, expanded into international markets, and even began collaborating with other designers. Each new venture was a testament to how far she had come, from a struggling single mother trying to scrape together rent money to a respected leader in the business world. But despite the glittering success, Lena never lost sight of what mattered most. Her office walls were adorned not just with awards and accolades, but with photos of her journey, the cramped apartment where it all started, the tiny kitchen table covered in beads, the first handwritten thank you notes she had sent to customers. These reminders kept her grounded, because for Lena, this empire wasn't built just on profits and prestige. It was built on perseverance, passion, and the belief that dreams are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they seem. One evening, years after that first $500 gamble, Lena found herself standing on the stage of a prestigious business gala, accepting an award for Entrepreneur of the Year. As she looked out at the crowd, at the faces of other successful business owners, industry leaders, and aspiring entrepreneurs, She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "When I started this journey," she said softly, "I had no money, no connections, and no idea how I was going to make it. All I had was a dream and the courage to risk everything for it. There were so many moments when I wanted to give up, when it felt like the world was telling me I wasn't good enough. But I kept going because I knew that failure wasn't the end. Giving up was. And today, standing here, I want to tell you all, if I can build this, so can you. Don't be afraid to take that leap. Don't be afraid to dream big, because sometimes the craziest ideas turn out to be the ones that change everything." As the audience erupted into applause, Lena felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had built more than just a business. She had built a legacy, a testament to the power of resilience, determination, and unyielding hope. And that, more than anything, was her greatest triumph. And that's Lena's incredible journey, from risking her last $500 to building an empire that changed her life and inspired so many others. If you found her story as inspiring as I did, make sure to hit that like button and share it with someone who could use a little motivation. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience, courage, and success. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.